Hello, and welcome to the Government Technology and Services Coalition's Homeland Security Today Insider Threat Program. As you may have seen earlier this month, we had an interview with Stephanie Yaros from the Department of Defense Insider Threat Lab. And today we get a very unique and interesting conversation with Bill Evanina. And Bill Evanina was director of the United States National Counterintelligence and Security Center for many, many years until he resigned and joined the HSToday board back in January of this year. We're very, very excited to welcome him to talk with us today. Hello, sir.
Hey, good morning and pleasure to be here. It's outstanding.
Great to see you. Great to see you, and really great to see you continuing your leadership role in the security community. You've had such a tremendous career, director of the NCSC, your work at the ODNI, work as National Counterintelligence Executive, FBI, you name it, you've done it. So we love having you with us, and certainly people with your caliber and experience to talk with us more about where the nation is in Homeland Security. Hopefully, everyone watching has seen that Mr. Evanina contributed to the 9/11 commemoration on the 20th anniversary and had some really great and prescient things to say about where we are, the state of our union, and certainly what we need to be worrying about in the future. So we were thrilled when you accepted leading our efforts on Insider Threat. Many don't know that September is Insider Threat Month, but we're here to change that. And we thank you for your leadership in helping us do so. So I just wanted to start, thank you for writing that piece. And would you talk a little bit about some of the things you mentioned in it and kind of the things that our state right now and what we need to worry about in the future?
Sure. And obviously it's a pleasure to be here. Very humbled to be part of this program. You're correct. I think September, serving as Insider Threat Month, is one of the most important months we have in the awareness campaign efforts. I think, we look at the landscape of threats that we face every single day, from cyber to ransomware to threats on our critical infrastructure, economic security. Nothing's more pernicious and devastating to a corporation or to an economy than the insider threat. And I think this is really why it's important to keep hammering down the awareness and hopefully mitigation tools that can prevent this. And the bigger picture, stepping out 100,000 feet, the piece I wrote was really trying to leverage the construct of terrorism and reapply the lexicon to state actors, right? To be able to say that, I believe that we are under a terrorist attack now every day from China and Russia and North Korea as they promulgate cyber attacks, insider threats, and ransomware every day in the United States. And my argument is that, if the Colonial Pipeline goes down, or you have a solar winds, or in the wintertime, if the natural gas lines go down and communities don't have fuel for a week or two, is that not terrorism? Is that not the same thing? And my argument is that just because we're not going to funerals and people aren't dying in a kinetic explosion doesn't mean it's not terrorism. And I think we have to, as a society, revector our mindset as to what the definition of terrorism is, and the fact that we see it every day from our nation state threat actors imposing their will on our society unabated. And I think that also is terrorism. So that was the crux of my argument.
Absolutely. And I think that it's, especially with cyber, I think it's very hard to see the death by 1,000 cuts. So there are all kinds of attacks all across not only the private sector, but also against government, which we've seen the cyber attacks on SolarWinds and others. And then we see that insider threat, both physical and cyber. Can you speak a little bit to how it's kind of a two-pronged threat?
Yeah, I think, we would call it, a blended threat that we would see, not only with respect to cyber. Cyber is a big, bold, vague word, right? What does that mean? Is it, and oftentimes we get wrapped around hacks, in the word, a breach. But the reality is most of those efforts come from self-inflicted wounds, right? I think right now, still 90% of all breaches that occur in the US are stemmed from spear phishing and from bad hygiene and our inability as corporations and businesses and academia to patch to do hygiene issues, to be able to put forth mitigation efforts to prevent malware from getting in. So I think, and that's a human issue. There's insider threats who do blended operations, provide either wittingly or unwittingly malware into corporations and businesses. At the same time, we cast all these things into the word cyber. And I think sometimes it gets misconstrued. And I think when you look at it from a destructive perspective or theft of IP perspective, it's really easy to put things into buckets. My argument would be, let's not look at buckets. Let's look at what the germane facts are with respect to cyber as a modality. At the end of the day, cyber's attacks, breaches, efforts that are nefarious only come from a few organizations, right? They come from nation state threat actors and their intelligence services. They come from terrorists and illegal criminal networks. That's it, right? So if we understand that, then we'll have a better aspect of trying to put mitigation efforts in place.
So what do you think it was that really put the insider threat on the map to actually get an awareness month? Because not everything has one. And the Insider Threat Awareness Month was certainly more recent than others. So what do you think it was that put it on the map?
A couple of things. Going back, we've had insiders for decades, a century, right? So, I would say going back to, the Romans, there's always been an insider, right? There's always been a spy. Spies catch spies. And up until probably the mid 1990s, I would say even to the 2000s, it was always looked upon as a spy. Like the insider is a spy working on behalf of Russia or China. The last 20 years, it's changed its mindset, I think, a little bit to the corporate espionage, right? The ability for individuals to work on behalf of foreign countries that don't necessarily work for foreign countries, right? The non-traditional collector, the businessman, the engineer, the scientist, the professor, it's changed its lexicon a little bit about that. And I think the executive order in 2010 and 11 by the president creating the Insider Threat Task Force to really drive a policy and structure for what does insider threat look like and what are the policies we're going to promulgate in the government to help mitigate some of these. And I think that started that process. And then I think in 2018, we at NCSC said, hey, we're going to have an Insider Threat Month. So we could use this to really shine the light on what it is. And it's not just catching spies or catching terrorists but it's also an employee wellness program. It's a very successful employee wellness program. So you identify people who are in need, who maybe they need employee assistance programs, they need some kind of intervention, and give them the help before they make a bad decision to go wrong, right? So I think that's how I will look at the linear transition and progress of Insider Threat Month has been. And the companies and government organizations to do this well, do it as an employee wellness program, not just catching bad actors.
That's exactly what Dr. Yarrow said in our interview about the DoD Threat Lab, that it's this evolution and that often you can intervene at certain stages. So that's an incredibly important piece. Who and what do you think is most vulnerable to insider threat attack?
Well, I think it's a collective view, right? We in the government, we always looked at, we were identifying trust for security clearances or who might be a susceptible individual. What are the risks calculus for that? We always look at the whole person, right? What is the whole person and what provides threat indicators for that person so we can get ahead of that early on. And those threat indicators change from person to person, organization, and where you are in your lifespan. But if you start to have a couple extra red flags, you might have some financial difficulties. You might have a child with special needs. You might have 3 or 4 employee infractions at work. You might have maybe not been promoted a few times in the last couple of years. You have some suspicious foreign travel. They all get added together to say, hey, wait a minute, we should look at Bill and try and do an intervention to see what's going on in his life that we can maybe help before he makes a bad decision to leak a document, to be frustrated, to give something to a reporter, or because actually the transition to marry this question, the transition we've really seen the last decade is the employee saying, you know what, I'm really upset, I'm disenfranchised, but I'm not willing to go give stuff to Russia or China, but I'm going to give it to the media. I would call that a media enabled, because it still goes to Russia and China anyway, but they think in their mind, they're not committing espionage. They're just releasing the stuff to a reporter and in a false whistleblowing mindset.
That's a fascinating development. And how have you seen the insider threat, if there's anything in addition to that, that someone would leak something to the media as opposed to, full on foreign actor? How else have you seen the insider threat evolve kind of since 9/11? Since it's the 20th anniversary, we're kind of looking at that evolution. Then where do you see it going?
It's a great question. I'm going to give you a personal vignette from me. So obviously after 9/11, working in New Jersey, I was a counterterrorism agent trying to find the next insider that was working for a company in New Jersey that was willing to do bad things, blow stuff up, work on behalf of Al Qaeda, whether through a tractor trailer or a dam or a pipeline. We're always looking for those insiders that were going to do kinetic damage on behalf of their beliefs of radical jihadism, right? Well, in 2005 and 6, I became involved in an espionage investigation, an individual named Leandro Aragoncio, who we ended up prosecuting and got prison time for spying on behalf of the Philippines. But he was an aide to Vice President Cheney, and then he was an FBI analyst. So he was my first example of, wow, insiders could be something other than a terrorist. Right, so that in 2005 and 6 really changed my optic to what an insider is. And at the end of the day, everyone has their own definition, but mine is that individual who's willing to come to work tomorrow and do something bad. Bad is vague, right? But that was my first experience that the insider can be someone other than a terrorist. And I think that, from my mind, set the tone for the next 15 years of my government career.
That's an incredible story, and it really kind of terrifying because you never know who it is or where they're going to come from. And frankly, these days, disenfranchised people seem to be everywhere.
That's correct.
Yeah. So trying to identify them is interesting. So what do you say to, the government person in charge of these types of threats, the CSO or the private sector CSO that's really facing all of this and going, are you kidding me? Like, one more thing. What do I do with one more thing?
So I think, I'm married in both. So both of my old job, dealing with the government agency heads, as well as having a strategy, a policy in place where you could drive your decision-making as a government entity, having a senior official, having a policy, having some monitoring of systems so we can identify nefarious behavior, and being transparent with your employees is probably the 4 best things you could do about what your program is, and having a clear, concise process for what you do when you identify someone. As well as in the private sector, I'm promulgating the same efforts to the corporations who want to do this now for employee wellness. The challenge is going to be moving forward as we see more and more employees working from home. They're no longer under our thumb, in our business, in our space, in our conference rooms, at their home, at their computer or the cubicle. They're at home, right? So as we drive new creative ways to expedite processing of their connectivity from home to business, we also have to continue to drive effective mitigation efforts to identify potential bad actors when they're working from home, right? It's going to be more of a challenge for the government and private sector as more and more people work from their home offices.
That sounds incredibly daunting. You didn't help. So given it is National Insider Threat Month, and you led our efforts this month and invited our readership to submit pieces, we encourage everyone to visit www.hstoday.us to see some of those pieces, certainly to read our commemoration of 9/11. But as we end this interview, tell me how you would encourage people to spread awareness about insider threats and what they can be doing to assist in this mission.
Great question. I would start by saying that there needs to be top-down leadership of the effort, whether it be in the government or in the private sector. The CEO, the director of the organization has to be committed to helping employees. And with that comes the underscoring of being able to identify bad actors before they create back. Security hygiene, right? Get back to basics. Understand that there's rules and policies, and those who violate them, you need to identify those and punish them. Thirdly, transparency of the workforce in the government or the private sector. Make sure these policies and programs are transparent to every employee so that every employee knows you have a program And number two, every employee knows they're part of the solution. So the solution to insider threat awareness and everyday endurance is about every employee, right? So if you see something, say something. If you're suspicious about a coworker doing something really weird and moving documents or traveling and being whispered, then it's okay to report that. You're not tattletaling, but you're helping your organization, your business survive the long process. So this has to be an all-inclusive effort, not just a security effort. And I think that's the message I want to leave, is that insider threat awareness and the mitigation is not a security process. It's in every employee process of a government organization or a private sector corporation.
Those are excellent points. I really want to thank you for leading us this month, and we hope you will lead us well into the future. I have a feeling you will. And also to encourage organizations to not only take your words to heart, but also to develop a culture of a bit of patriotism and a culture that is positive around protecting the United States, because the threat to us has become extremely dissipated. It is, when I was president of InfraGard of the National Capital Region, I used to say that now every person who touches a computer is kind of a warrior, because it's through their computer, it's through their actions, it's through lax cyber hygiene that you can let the bad actor in, intentionally or unintentionally. And so we all have had to stand up to this responsibility of possibly being the vector that can destroy the whole company. And it sounds so ominous, but it's true, because you don't know who's targeting you. You don't know what they're trying to get. And you don't realize it when you're just trying to get those free Redskin tickets. So with that, I will thank you again. And I have to take a moment to thank you for your service to the country. You have been a tremendous asset to the United States, and we're just really honored to have you among us. So have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again for your continued leadership.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here. And good luck on the rest of the month. It's one day left. And moving forward, I'm always going to be a great partner with the Homeland Security Today group.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, you're our fireworks display for the end of the month. So thank you. Share us on LinkedIn, and sharing is caring. So please, everyone, when you see this fabulous interview with Mr. Evanina, share it on LinkedIn, share it with your networks, and help us spread the word. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Cheers.